John, welcome to the show. It is absolutely amazing to have you on, kind of talking about it off camera, but very full circle moment. I had Haley Perlis on my show thanks to one of your podcast episodes, and now I'm having the actual podcast, I guess we could say host or co-host. My first question is a little bit out of the blue. It's very, I would say, I wouldn't want to say creative, but it's going to be not a first question kind of question. The Winter Olympics just happened. It's currently February 2026 when I record this episode. And before the closing ceremony, they had this show that was called Nor Dash Way. And pretty much all it was the Olympics were showing how Norway has gotten most of the gold medals compared to all the other countries. According to The Guardian, they've won more than anybody else for the past 12 years, right?
Mhm.
So they were saying that their approach, as far as in Norway, is they let the kids be, first of all, creative what they want to do. They have a lot of different variety. They let the kids actually choose what direction they want to take their life in. And if they don't enjoy something, they're not forced to do it, right? For you, you started the Changing the Game project in 2012. And a lot of what you focus on is making sure, children prioritizing joy, development. It's a child-centered focus as opposed to, the hard grind, all of that stuff. It's really starting at the youth. So, given Norway's success of creating amazing talents because of their approach of joy, making sure they're creative, making sure they're enjoying what they're doing. What is a takeaway that we can learn from that and your philosophy kind of put together?
Yeah, and it seems every Winter Olympic cycle, people people talk about Norway, and even Summer Olympics, like they have very good track and field runners and things like that as well. And so per capita, yeah, they win the most medals. Whereas here in the United States, it's sort of we have so many people that we can afford to have lots and lots of people drop out. And so, I think the lesson from Norway, and let's be completely transparent, right? They're very different countries, very homogenous. A lot of money in Norway that comes from oil revenue that goes to support sporting programs that makes them free and all that sort of stuff versus, our country, which is so different weather-wise, geographically, culturally, all this sort of stuff. That being said, you know, they keep everyone in sport, right? So they have about 90% of kids playing sports up through adolescence. They don't really start making national teams or focusing on, things like standings until 12, 13, 14, right? They let kids sample multiple sports. So it's just like, hey, it's about the joy, it's about the children. And people say, oh, well, now you're just not competitive, but yet the competitive athletes arise out of that system, right? And so I think the real lesson is right now in the US, the sports system is not about the needs and the values and the priorities of the children. It's about the needs and values and priorities of the adults who run the sports and make their living off the sports. And that's the problem. So, whereas the child wants joy, the adult wants commitment. Where the child wants sampling, the adult wants specialization. And what happens is we burn out and beat up our kids, and so many of them walk away. And we make it really expensive too. Whereas there, it's not.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I totally agree with everything you're saying. I know a lot of what you do has to do with youth programs and I guess fighting back against the current system, especially in the US. So, what is one thing that you noticed that you would change if it was up to you how the youth organization would be led?
I mean, it's hard to say just one, right? Because there's so many different things that fit into why kids are leaving. But I would say if there was one magic thing, it would just be local leagues, like letting kids play seasonally local leagues up until 12, 13 years old, rather than, oh my God, if we want to get into the baseball pipeline, we got to play only baseball starting at 7. We got to play only soccer starting at 7. That's where the problem is. And so then what happens is it gets more expensive, and it's not just the fees, it's then the travel, right? So I had a friend in Chicago actually who's a youth hockey coach, and he was talking about, he did some research on like a group of a 10-year-old hockey team that, mid-season had already played 30 games outside of Chicago. And it's like, I don't know, you live there. Like, I don't know how many people live in Chicago, but it's really hard to believe that a bunch of 9 and 10-year-old kids can't get a game in Chicago. Like, what's wrong with us?
Yeah, 100%. As far as, we're talking about the fact that it's maybe the system is not incentivized to like help the kids. It's all about the money, right? The coaches get paid. The parents are paying so much money to the leagues and to the coaches. But when it comes to the actual coach themselves, how can they help fix this system? Like, how much of a role do they have to have in order to change what's currently going on?
It's a great question because some things are outside of a coach's control, right? The league that they are forced to play in and where those teams come from, the system. Like, I meet a lot of coaches who are like, I hear what you're saying, but if I do that, right? If I make it about the kids, right? This is happening in ice hockey a lot now where people are like, we know, and it's, again, talking about the Olympics, we just had men and women win a gold medal in the Olympics for the United States. And we've had a lot of success where we changed hockey to cross ice hockey and small and no championships. Well, now there's this big push back to full ice hockey at 8 years old, in spite of all the evidence, in spite of the fact that we're producing better, more skillful players. And I talk to the coaches, the people running these organizations, and they're like, yeah, I hear you. I want to do it. But the parents don't want it. And if I don't do it, someone else will, and I'll lose all my kids. Right. And so this is the problem that we face in this country, where anyone can start a hockey governing body or anyone can start a hockey league that says, yeah, we'll let your 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds play full ice hockey. And so many coaches are stuck in that. Now, what can coaches do? First of all, maybe you can't change the whole environment, but you can change the environment of your team. The way you treat children, the way you engage their parents, the way you connect and become a trusted mentor and teacher and friend, all that sort of stuff, that's within your control in your little kingdom, if you will. And so I think that's where you always start as a coach. You can't change the system, but you can certainly do your very best within your team or teams to create the best environment possible to keep the most kids involved as long as possible.
Yeah, beautiful answer. So, kind of zooming out from the whole system and more to the individual player, let's say that, the system is, we have to take it into account, obviously, because people are playing within it. But as far as an individual goes, so you've spoken to the US Olympic team, USA Wrestling, you've spoken to a lot of people in a room that you could say were the top 1%, right? They were the best performers in a certain sport. What do you notice about those people that they had that you think maybe an average person in the sport lacks?
I think there's a couple of things. And, it's not always the most popular thing to say, but number one, good genetics, right? You
Interesting.
can't train your way to 7 feet tall. So it starts with great genetics. Number two, just this innate drive and commitment that's unique, right? I've been very lucky to coach kids who have made it to professional sports in the sport I coached them in, or other sports, and I always say they're not normal, right? Their drive to achieve, their commitment to their dream, their willingness to give up other things that high school kids do, like going out on Friday night with your friends, or going to the prom or things like that. They're like, nope, I want to be a professional baseball player. I want to be an Olympic swimmer, things like that, right? Like, they're driven differently. And I don't believe you can make your kid be like that, and that's why, they have siblings who aren't like that. And there's nothing wrong with those siblings. It's just these kids are really unique. And so I think there's just something about the drive, the commitment of truly elite performers that's different. Now, those same psychological characteristics that lead them to great success can also, eat them up and burn them out and churn, right? They're not necessarily things that we would look as healthy. There is a little bit of sort of self-centeredness that's required, a little bit of
Mm.
ruthlessness that's required to get there, that doesn't always play well with the rest of the world. So we're really good at looking at the unicorns who make it, but a lot of people who maybe had all that stuff but then had a really unfortunate injury or something, they have a big shift to make in their lives when they're out of that sporting realm in order to, you know, play nice in the sandbox, if you will.
Yeah. Speaking of unicorns, so you talked for your second point, you said the innate drive, and then first point you said good genetics. You had Steve Kerr on your podcast, and he's coach of Golden State, and he coaches Steph Curry. And Steph Curry is somebody who didn't have good genetics, but he did have the innate drive, which made him a really good three-point shooter, right? I'm not extremely familiar with basketball, but this I do know, right? Do you think that if somebody was born with a lack of good genetics, their good drive can make up for it?
Well, first of all, I mean, Steph Curry's dad played in the NBA, so he didn't have bad genetics, right? He wasn't going to be
Exactly.
7 feet tall, but he also, had a dad who played in the NBA, who was a great shooter, who understood the mindset and the mentality that it would take. And then, Steph was just a late bloomer, right? Went to Davidson College, everyone, so he always had this thing, and then it all just clicked. So, I mean, here's the thing. You don't control your genetics, right? So what we really need to focus on from coaching or athlete development is what are the things that are within your control, because you have an influence on those things, right? You're not influenced by, where you were born. You can't change that, right? You're probably not going to be an Olympic skier if you were born in the Sahara Desert, right? It's just, it's not in your windshield. But if you're born in the Rift Valley in Ethiopia, you might be an elite runner because there's tons of elite runners there, and you're like, oh, that's it, and I could do this because people from my village do this. But something like your hours of practice, right? You control that. So your drive and your motivation, you control that. Your choices that you make around nutrition and sleep and taking care of your body, you control that, right? So there's research now, a lot going out. A guy named Joe Baker in Canada does a lot of this. What are the call it the psychological characteristics that are great indicators that you might be good, right? Are you coachable? Are you teachable? These things you control, focus on those. Don't focus on the things that you have zero control over, like how tall you're going to be.
And what are some of those psychological characteristics?
I mean, we've talked about them. I think resilience is one of them, right? This innate drive, this ability to ability to overcome mistakes and move forward. An optimistic mindset versus pessimistic mindset. Things like that. There's a bunch of them. But I think we kind of hit on some of the big ones there. That if you have those or you train those, you have a pretty good chance of making it. Because no one gets there without trauma. No one gets there without setbacks. But how do you view the setback, right? Your attitude towards that setback, your willingness to learn, your patience sometimes, all that plays into it.
Yeah. John, you talked a little bit about coaches, kind of going back to, Steve Kerr. What is the role of a coach? Are they responsible for making sure that people perform up to a certain standard, or are they responsible for unlocking something that was hidden inside somebody that they didn't know about?
I tend to agree more with the latter of what you said, right? That people have this in them, and they have this spark, and your job is to fan it, right? That I tend to sort of think that the first rule of coaching is do no harm, right? Get out of the way sometimes and fan that flame. I think the idea that you're going to take someone who is not motivated and drive them to this thing, it's probably just not going to happen. But what you could do is have someone with a spark, and you could douse the flame, right? And that's where I think coaches, we have to be very mindful and very careful about our actions, and also especially, you know, making early decisions and deciding very at a very young age of this guy's not going to make it. Like we just don't know. I just had this guy on the podcast named Chris Maleo, and he was just sharing. It's an awesome story. He wrote this book called The Cheerleader, and it was about an assistant football coach that he hired for his high school program in New Jersey. And the coach, a guy named Frankie Knieve, had cerebral palsy and was nonverbal. And he hired him on his staff, and he said we learned so much from Frankie. But he told a story about this meeting of this one kid, and they're in a coaches meeting talking about the depth chart, and they're like, yeah, you know what? Why are we spending time on that kid? He's not going to help us this year. And this coach, Frankie, typed in, because he couldn't speak, typed in, everyone matters, right? And he said it shifted the room, and they poured into this kid. And lo and behold, the kid's senior year, he's the third string quarterback. They're playing their biggest rival in the playoffs. The first two guys get hurt, and this kid comes into the game and throws a winning touchdown.
Wow.
Because of a decision years before that everybody matters, right? That we shouldn't write someone off right now. Most of us are not in, like, we're not picking the Olympic team. Right? We're in youth development, working with young kids who haven't gone through puberty, and we have no idea what they're going to be like in a couple years, and yet we're making selections and assuming that we're right, and turfing kids out of the system before we even have a chance to know if they're going to be good.
Yeah. When you look at elite performers, how much of it belongs to the player as opposed to the coach?
I would say it's almost all on the player. It's almost all on the athlete. I can't give you a percentage.
Sure,
Right?
I
I think
understand.
probably everyone's different. Now, my favorite quote about coaching is this guy, Bill Beswick. He said, a coach is someone who takes you to a place you've never been before and probably wouldn't get there on your own. Right. I like that. Right. So it's like the coach sees something in you that maybe you don't see yourself, and gives you tools or creates the environment that allows you to pull that outside of yourself. And I like that. And so a great coach pushes and says, Elon, now do more. Right. Great. Now do more. Now push one more. Right. That's it. Out of a place of love and trust and respect for the athlete. And so, yes, of course they have a role. And I think most athletes will credit coaches who made a huge difference in their life. But I think a lot of it first comes from within, and a coach is more likely to do harm than good if they're not careful.
Yeah. So how can people go about finding this type of coach?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice, right? It's like we have
Yeah,
Angie's List to find a plumber, an electrician, and
right.
all
Yeah.
these things that we spend all this time looking at reviews, and then we sign our kid up and we know nothing about their coach, right? So I think we have to, as parents, like do our homework and look beyond, oh, how many kids did this club send to on college scholarships? Right? When I'm bringing my 9-year-old there, I don't care how many seniors got a scholarship. What I'd rather know is how many of those seniors started here at 9. Because usually these super programs that are sending these people, they're just really good at recruiting. And so all those kids on the 9-year-old team, maybe a third of them are left on the 18-year-old team. So most people came from elsewhere. Right? So is your developmental system really that good, or are you just good at recruiting other people, the players other people developed? And so looking at that, looking at how they, create a system that serves the needs of your kid throughout the ages, and not just what are we focusing on at 9 years old or 10 years old? So I think it's just hard for parents to do their homework. Go to a game, stand on the sidelines. How do the parents behave? How does the coach behave? What's tolerated? What's not? What do kids do on that team when someone makes a mistake? Do they get yanked out of the game, or do they just get on with it because they're not afraid to make a mistake because it's a learning environment? There's so many things I think as a parent you can do to find the right environment, and maybe the worst thing you can do is look at the website and see how many seniors got a scholarship.
That's very interesting. So for me, I know you played professional soccer. I played soccer as well. Nowhere near professional, but I played soccer. One of the biggest things that I remember is, you make a mistake and you get taken out of the game because it's like, it might not even be a costly mistake, but at least for the team that I was playing on, it was incentivized by, oh, you have to succeed. But it seems a little bit counterintuitive because you have to fail in order to succeed, but then you're stopping the growth of this person because whenever they're failing, you're taking them out and not seeing that light of success. What do you think about that? Like, did you ever experience that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, and it's the worst type of development environment. I certainly played in that sometimes. I think I was pretty lucky as a kid. I had coaches who let you play. I had, one of my most impactful youth coaches was a full Israeli international and represented his country, and he was really patient with stuff like that. He was a good, kind man, I think, and when I think of that, I'm like, that was good. And so, I mean, you think about that, right? Like in any aspect of life. So I say this to coaches or parents: if you make a mistake and you're going to get yanked from the game, I mean, if you asked me one bad question and I hung up on you, it wouldn't be a really fun podcast for you, right? And it also, like, you're nervous, you're afraid, and now you're cautious, right? So in soccer, if I'm going to get yanked for giving a ball away, then I'm not going to dribble. I'm not going
Yeah.
to play incisive forward passes. I'm not going to take a chance on a shot or a cross. I'm going to pass it square and I'm going to pass it backwards. And none of those things are going to make me a good player 4 years from now, right? But if I'm afraid, I mean, like when I coached young kids, you would know this, right? Like 10, 11, it's sort of that age where you're like getting, okay, pass it back to the goalkeeper, right? So we can keep possession. Well, what happens when you start teaching kids to pass back to the goalkeeper? Inevitably, one of them is going to roll under her foot or his foot and go in, right? You're going to score an own goal. And that kid's probably going to start crying and feel terrible and whatever. But you have to like teach your parents and your kids like, hey, that's okay. That happens. That's the kind of mistake we want to make here because later on it's going to be okay. And so, I just see things like that all the time. And you have to create an environment where mistakes are the right type of mistakes are encouraged and allowed. And if that happens, now you'll see a team that's creative, that's brave, that's hard to play against, that's doing unexpected things because the coach has said, "Hey, that's what we do here."
Yeah. I know this is something you talk about a lot, but how big of a role do the parents have in the child's success?
I mean, I think parents are the most influential people in their lives, right? So if it comes to sports, your actions and reactions to how they are doing are of course going to play a massive role in what they do. Like I would look at this. I don't know if you remember this from when you were playing. Like I'll go watch a game and I'll see a kid make a mistake, and then I look at where do they look, right? If
That's
they
interesting.
look at their coach, okay, fair enough, right? I mean, what do we want is, okay, I made a mistake, just get on with it, go get the ball back. Great. They look at their coach, maybe they're a little afraid of their coach. If they look at their mom or dad when they make a mistake, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. So parents play a massive role, and I think it's super hard. I did this talk last night with a bunch of little league coaches, and we were talking about like parents are, and the coaches and these little league coaches, they're all parents too, right? They're all most of them are coaching their own kid, and they're like stressed, scared, right? I don't want my kid to miss out. I don't want to fail my child. And so because of that, we steal the reps, we push them and we force them to do things so they don't fall behind. And sometimes we never ask our kids, well, exactly, what do you want from this? And so yeah, we play a massive role. But it's the kids' childhood. They need autonomy. They need enjoyment. They need intrinsic motivation to develop. It can't all come from you.
Yeah, that's a interesting topics. I think that's something that people neglect is like, okay, you have the coach, you have the player. People don't think about the parents because the parents, they spend all the time, like students, not students, but players could be practicing, they have their games, but then when they're not there, they're with their parents, right? So like their parents are saying, oh, do this, try that. It's interesting because like when I'm thinking back to my soccer days, I remember my dad used to always go to my games and I think it was a little bit of both, like pressure that my dad was watching me, but I don't know how much of it was like in a bad way, like it was kind of more like I just wanted to like I wouldn't say impress, but like it's like he took the time to be here. I really appreciate it. So I kind of want to do good for him.
I think that's
Um,
okay, don't you?
yeah, yeah, totally.
That's not the wrong, I don't think that's the wrong type of, that's presence by your dad. And he's making the commitment to be here or to drive me wherever we're playing. I think that's fine. Like that's okay, right? If when you get in the car afterwards and he's like, Elon, you did this one wrong and this wrong and this wrong, like that's the wrong type of pressure that then makes you tight and tentative and scared when you're trying to play.
Yeah. So then how can we instill confidence in the kids from a young age?
Well, I think confidence comes from a couple places, right? First of all, confidence comes from competence, right? I can't tell you, you're so great at soccer, you're so great at soccer. That's not going to make you great at soccer, right? So it comes from putting in the work, right? If you are in the best shape of your life and you've been training more than ever and your touch has gotten better and you've worked on your shooting and your weak foot, you're going to be far more confident stepping onto that field because no one here has worked harder than I have. That's confidence, right? So confidence is earned. Um, Now, I think what we can do is if we're overly critical about mistakes, we can chip away at people's confidence. Um, but it starts with earning it through getting better, right? And then it's the environment we create that allows them to keep going and doesn't punish mistakes and understands that they're human beings and this is a learning environment. That's where we have to kind of get to next. So I think it starts there, and then it starts with having people believe in you. So your parents' belief in you, but like your coach believe in you, teammates believe in you. That's where I think that's where real confidence comes from.
Yeah. On episode 353 of your podcast, you had Michael Gervais on. I'm a huge fan of Michael. I've been following him on Instagram for like ever now. And he said something that was interesting. So he said in the beginning, he said the first rule to mastery is working from the inside out, which I thought was interesting. And you just mentioned that the confidence comes externally, kind of internally. How much of it, and I think at what stages do you think it's more important to start from the inside and work out compared to waiting for the outside to come in, if that makes
But
sense?
yeah, I mean, I think what Michael Gervais talks about a lot is like I think his book was all about fear of other people's opinions. I think he called it FOPO, right? Of that when you are letting the external noise drive your actions and what you do, you'll never, you'll never, when you seek to be liked by others, you're giving up your autonomy because you do not control that, right? When you seek to be respected by others for your work, for the standards you hold, right? That's not giving up autonomy, right? Because I don't control whether I can do everything and someone might not like me, right? But I can do the right things and be respected for doing the right things. So I would agree with him that like it starts inside and then internally, right? I do the work. It causes me to do the external work, but I think really what he's saying is it starts with you, right? You don't get belief by waiting for other people to give it to you. You get it by doing the work yourself. And yeah, so in that regard, I would agree completely. But I also can't just, you know, meditate my way to, you know, finishing like Messi.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. That's so interesting because I think as somebody, so I'm 21 years old, and I see a lot of people have this false notion that, kind of like you talked about, you can't say something and believe it without actually internally believing it, right? I guess I don't mean to hate on the idea of affirmations. I think affirmations can be very good, but I think some people take it the wrong way, if you will. So, in the same way, people think that self-belief can come from kind of just saying stuff to themselves. And as somebody who not only has had 450 plus podcast episodes, but has so much experience in coaching, how much of this confidence, how much of this self belief has to come from the actual proof that you are doing this thing?
Well, affirmations without action don't really get you anywhere, right?
I like that
Affirmations
affirmation.
without good habits, I think they're important, right? I think your last thoughts of the day and your first thoughts of the day, focusing on gratitude, focusing on, self belief are important. But then if you just sit in your rocking chair all day, nothing's going to change, right? So you can say whatever you want, but they have to lead you to action, right? And the best performers in uncertain situations, they're scared, right? It's hard, it's stressful. You think some pro golfer, you know, with a 3 foot putt to win the Masters isn't like, you know, just bound up inside and whatever. They're not just like, oh, whatever, I mean, go play golf with your buddies and make a putt for $10. You're like, oh my God. So
Yeah,
so I think it's so much of it is building the ability, the capacity that when you are in those uncertain situations, you can still take action, right? That's
interesting.
what the highest performers do. A one-on-one to win an NBA championship or whatever. Michael Jordan, a three-pointer to win an NCAA title. It's the capacity to take action in that moment and not pass the buck, not freeze, not whatever. And I think that's what sometimes we forget when we tell kids, "Oh, don't be scared," or "You shouldn't be nervous," or "Yeah, you should because you care." Right? If you care, you're going to be nervous. There's going to be stressful. If the outcome is uncertain, all those things lead to anxiety, sweat, dry mouth, whatever. And you still have to take action. And if those who can take action, no matter what they feel, they're the ones who usually do the best.
Yeah. So you mentioned affirmation without action doesn't get you anywhere, but what about the other way around? Action without affirmation?
Well, the greatest, we did a recent podcast with Jim Lehrer, and Haley, right? And Jim was Haley's mentor, and Jim Lehrer started the Human Performance Institute and very science-based sports psychology work. And he talks about the most influential coach in your life is the voice in your head, right? And so you can take all the actions that you want, but if the whole time you're saying, "Man, I suck. I can't do this. Why am I even out here? I don't deserve this." You're you're not going to get there, right? So that voice in your head, what he said in the podcast was that really stuck with me. It was like, you have to listen to that voice and then say, if a friend of mine spoke to me about me like this, would I still be friends with that person? Right? And if the answer is no, then you got to change what you're saying to yourself in your head. And what he would say then is, so write down the most common negative thoughts that you're saying to yourself, and then write something that's the opposite of that, that's positive. So I'm not good enough becomes I'm getting better, right? I'm not strong enough, I'm getting stronger, right? And so practice, right? Write down what you're going to say and then practice saying that. And he told the story of doing that with like Andre Agassi and Jim Courier, right? Top tennis players, of taking the negative self-coaching, turning it into something positive, and then making it a habit. and how what a difference it made in their performances.
Do you think that negative, I don't want to say negative self-talk, but negative thoughts can be the fuel to make you take action, or it's all bad?
Yes, I think they can, right? Um, Trying to think the name of the book. It's called Power and Force. This guy, Dan Hawkins, and he talks about the energetic qualities of different emotions. And so, very low energy ones are things like shame, despair, hopelessness, and high energy things are love, optimism, things like that. But one of the, towards the bottom is like anger, right? That's a low energy emotion, but we can act out of anger, right? And we also certainly can act out of fear, right? Get chased by a bear, see what you do. You're probably not just going to sit there, right? So we can act out of those things, but over time, coming from those places is far less productive than coming from a place of hope, of love, of higher energy emotions. So yes, you can certainly do that, but you'll also eat yourself up inside if all you're doing is beating yourself up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's very interesting. I only think about that because I feel like for me to get the podcast going, it was a little bit of kind of like, I wouldn't say anger, but just more like, come on, what am I doing? Like maybe, I don't know, like,
Significance?
yeah,
Like
yeah, maybe
who
that's
am
what it
I to
was.
do this type thing?
Yeah, that like imposter syndrome for sure, but I think that came along the way. But I'm saying to first start, maybe just kind of fear that like I was just letting time go by and I'm not doing anything, and then I just found the thing, right? But that's very
I wish
interesting.
I thought like that at 21. I was just like, oh man, look, it's a powder day. Let's go skiing. Way ahead of me.
I appreciate it. You don't want to see me ski, by the way. It's not a good recipe. It's a recipe for disaster. But something that I love, especially when I have podcasters on my show, is I think people don't understand the levels of intelligence that podcasters have. I think I am an exception. I do not have a level of intelligence, but I'm just saying that it's so cool for you to speak to so many different types of people. You get so many different types of experiences. So I love picking the brains of podcasters because you guys have an immense knowledge of stuff, especially for you performance. If you could theoretically, if all of your episodes disappeared, if I guess all of your experience was gone and you could only share one message that you remember in your 450 episodes, I know this is a big loaded question, but what would be that one thing that stuck with you?
I would have to, because I'm Irish, answer a question with a question, which is I think because we have like coaches, right? And we have athletes and we have scientific people, that answer might be different, right? For them. The big takeaway. From a coach standpoint, the biggest message across all these incredible coaches we've interviewed is it would be, the best coaches win the relationship game. That high level coaching is all about relationships. Knowledge of the sport matters, but it's maybe 20% of it, right? Human connection, understanding people, that's where the best of the best really excel.
That's an amazing point. So, with that in mind, how can teams learn to build an unstoppable culture?
Well, first, I think you have to define it, right? You have to put down on paper as a group, who are we? What do we stand for here, right? And then agree as a group. Are we all willing to be held accountable for these things we just said we want to be, right? And then you go about every single day getting a little bit better and holding each other accountable for it. I'm working on a new book now around team captains, and this is, we reached out to a lot of captains and coaches and said, what is the biggest challenges that you face as a team captain? And probably the number one is balancing friendship and leadership, right?
Mm,
Holding your friends accountable to the standard, risking that friendship because the team and the culture matter most. And so this is, I think, a huge thing when it comes to culture. So we have to define what it is. I have to agree that I'm willing to be held accountable and I'm willing to hold all of you accountable. And then the coach comes in as like the ultimate, but it's far better when teammate to teammate, first self accountability, then my teammate holds me accountable, and then my coach holds me accountable, not just the coach and everyone else just tries to get away with stuff. So I think that's where culture starts, is these agreed upon values, governance, pillars, whatever you want to call them. And then this day after day accountability to the standard that we have set, right? Not a rule, but a standard that these are the things we aspire to be every single day.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. So we heard the coach's side of it. You said culture, making sure the team, where I guess the coach wins the relationship game. Now, what about the professional soccer side of you? What would you say in your hundreds of episodes has been something you wish you knew earlier?
I mean, I wish, because I was, a team captain in high school and college. Like, I wish I got taught about leadership. I think I could have been a better leader. Um, I could have, yeah, I could have done more, right? I think I did okay, but I just kind of figured it out. And maybe I got that from my parents of what it meant to be a leader. My dad was a fire chief and stuff like that. So I saw leadership. But I could have been better. I mean, I think many athletes, when you look back on stuff, and I wasn't a great player, and I got hurt, and I was done early. Was sort of like, when you look back, when you get older, did I take advantage? Like, if I only knew then what I know now, like what an opportunity it is to go and play. I wish I maybe did a little bit more. I wish I knew more about science and nutrition, because I ate a lot of pizza and burgers and probably drank too much beer. you know?
Yeah. Okay, so now we heard the coach and the player perspective. What about the mindset? You've had some amazing people, including Haley Pearls, who we talked about. So you, of all people, definitely understand how important it is to have, your mind involved, your mindset. What's one thing you can leave with my audience that you wish you knew?
Hmm. I mean, I think I struggled with sort of self-worth a little bit. Like, what am I doing here? I'm not good enough and stuff like that. Especially, I had some bad injuries, and then you're really struggling to come back and get back to where you were, and playing through pain and sort of the frustration of getting injured and stuff like that. So work on, self-worth. I mean, certainly I'm 54. Like, when I was playing, there was no psychologist at the school or anything like that. Like, no one did anything like that. So it was just sort of like, you tough it out and you figure it out on your own. And if you have the drive and determination, you get through stuff. But I think, to go back, like, in terms of the mindset of being successful, and this isn't just in sports, right? Like, your podcast, your writing, your speaking, whatever you do, whatever I do, is going to, like, own it, right? Own it. If I go out and I grind and I work hard and I do the right things day after day, good things will eventually happen. When I started Changing the Game project, like, I didn't take a paycheck for 2 years. I just worked and tried to get out there and wrote blogs and did talks and just tried to do the right thing, wrote a book, and it's like that just persistence day after day. Like, a lot of people give up too soon, right? A lot of people give up too soon, and nothing good happens. I said to you before, like, everyone goes, "Oh, look at that, how lucky, he came out of nowhere." No, 20 years, you didn't know him, but he didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah. So then, a little follow-up question to that, because I think this is very interesting, especially for somebody young like me. For the people that might struggle to keep going because it's hard to see maybe the proof, or hard to see that on the other end of this extremely hard thing, there are going to be amazing things. How can we learn to not give up so easily?
I think a big part of stuff is, I don't want to say it the wrong way. There's a guy named Brad Stulberg just came out with a book called The Way of Excellence, right? And he talks about like attaching. I'm going to say it wrong, but it's like if you feel a strong purpose in the work that you're doing or the goal you're pursuing, you're going to push through down moments. If you don't feel any purpose behind it, right? If you feel like, oh, this is a waste of time, or I'm just going to dabble, then I think it's really hard to push through those difficult moments. Not everything should be pushed through either. and I can't tell you what that is. Like sometimes grit or resilience can be a detriment because you keep pushing an idea that nobody wants, right? If you're
Interesting.
building
Yeah.
product X and no one wants product X, I don't care how hard you work, no one still wants product X, right? And so, but recognizing that. And so, what helped me like push through when I started changing the game project was when I would be on an airplane and I'm flying to a talk and I'm sitting next to someone and they say, "What do you do?" And they're, my age or older, and and they probably have kids. And I say, "Oh, I work with schools and sports clubs and do coach education and help parents support their kids." Not a single person ever said, "Huh, that's weird. I don't think there's a need for that." Right?
Interesting.
Everyone was like, "Oh my God, you should come to
We
my
need
kid's
you.
school."
We need you, John. Yeah.
Right? No one ever said, "Wow, that sounds stupid. Does anyone need you?" Right? So it's like I knew it was out there and I just had to keep showing up and being authentic and offering something and building trust. And if I did that, eventually people would find out about me that, hey, I was offering maybe something that could help ease a few pain points.
Yeah, John, that's awesome. That's something that I think I'm struggling with a little bit, like especially in the past couple of years, because it's tough. I mean, especially I'm young. It's hard to know what the world's really like. I'm living in a little bubble myself. It's interesting you were talking about that. I wrote down here that I feel like maybe people have a misalignment problem, right? Like, because I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, for my podcast, I've done one episode every week for over 2 years, and it's because I didn't give myself
Amazing.
a choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like this is the thing I'm willing to do. Like, I joke about it, but like, if I get hurt, if I go to the hospital, like, how am I going to upload another podcast episode? That's the first thing I'm
Yeah.
thinking about. So I don't know it's interesting.
You know what, though?
Um,
Let me just say, congratulations.
Thank you.
What an unbelievable discipline to do that, right? We're at 470 weeks. We haven't missed a week. One time we missed it a bit because the auto publisher broke down, right? But
Yeah.
other than that, we've never missed a week, right? And so it's like, and that discipline of going is so important because on the weeks where if I had ever missed a week, it would be so easy to miss two. You know what I
Yeah. Oh,
mean?
that's
It would be
interesting.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
easy to do it, but it's like, no, I've never missed a week. I'm not going to break the streak now. And I like the comedian Jerry Seinfeld talks about this. Like, why is he so good at 70 whatever years old he is? Because he's like, I write every day. I never miss a day. And he goes, and if something happens and I miss a day because of some crazy thing, I'm in the hospital, I write the next day. I've never missed 2 days in a row ever, right? And so you show up and you do the work every day. You release an episode a week, and pretty soon, number one, pretty soon, it just becomes this great productive habit. But number two, and you're probably there, you have enough episodes that if you're in the hospital, you can go replay one, and that works too.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. My last question to you, John, is going back to what we were talking about earlier when I asked you the question about all of your experiences in your podcasts from the coach's perspective, player perspective, mindset perspective. You mentioned relationships, self-worth, and leadership. Do you think that because those are the things that you wish you knew, that's what your focuses are, and that's, I guess, your virtues of coaching, where you're the strongest?
Yes, for sure. Because I think they're incredibly important. And I think some things come more naturally to others, right? Some people are very emotionally intelligent and understand the relationships that might not have been me. So that's an area that I've had to put focus on because it's not how I necessarily react in situations. I'm pretty independent. I move quickly. I don't seek collaboration. That's why I own my own business, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think those things matter. But I would go back if I talk about my coaching, my work, my life. The number one motivating thing for me is joy, fun, right? So when I would, 30 years of coaching soccer, like, um, this needs to be fun, right? This has to be about joy. Because if it's not, um, I don't want to be out here. It's not fun for me. It's not fun for them. And so I always ask myself, and I always tell coaches, like, when you run a practice, ask yourself, would I have wanted to be a player in that practice? If
Oh,
the
that's
answer is
awesome.
no, you probably shouldn't do it again, right? But if you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, that would have been awesome. I wanted to get the boots on and go play, then it was probably a good thing. Your players enjoyed it. And I always felt like it was a success when I sort of like, all right, grab the cones. And guys are like, wait, what do you mean? We're done? I'm like, yeah, 90 minutes. No way. They don't believe
Yeah.
it. And I think that's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. John, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had such a good time speaking. Where can people find you at? Any links, shout outs?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you, man. You're doing amazing stuff for a young guy. You're decades ahead of my thought process when I was 21. So, just keep showing up, man. You're already showing up every week, and that's amazing. So keep going. And I expect to hear big things from you. For me, changingthegameproject.com is kind of the mothership where you can find our podcast, which is called Way of Champions. You can find, sort of our, members area, which is all these courses and stuff that we've done. I think my brother just looked it up for me. I have like 241 blog posts on there and 470 podcasts. So you can really go down a gigantic rabbit hole if you want to. But that's the best thing. All the books are on Amazon. Every Moment Matters for coaches, The Champion Teammate for athletes, and Changing the Game for parents.
For my listeners, thank you for listening. I'll see you next Tuesday. And let me also, again, recommend John's podcast. This is The Reason We Met, and it's awesome. One of the best podcasts that I listen to. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday.